one winter, a high school admission guide addressed to my son arrived at our home. Unbelievable. My son, Samuel, passed away 7 years ago. When I called the school, they only told me to come in. Is this some mistake, or am I falling for a scam? Even though I had these thoughts, the pain of losing Samuel had been haunting me, and I found myself heading to the school on the designated day. There, I learned an unbelievable truth. I'm Emily, 42 years old. I started working at my dream publishing company right out of college. I've been an editor for 20 years now. People often think editing is a glamorous job, but it's actually really tough. 2 years ago, I became the editor-in-chief of a popular women's magazine. I've finally gotten used to the new responsibilities, but I'm busier than ever. The truth is, I never wanted to be so consumed by my work, let alone become an editor-in-chief. I'd been turning down the offer to take the role for about 5 years. The reason? Samuel. I've always longed for a family. I didn't have the best upbringing and spent a lonely childhood. I was envious of my friends whose parents were home on weekends, sharing meals and playtime. I knew from a young age that I wouldn't have that with my own parents. I'd eat dinner alone in the living room, placing stuffed animals on chairs to keep me company. I vowed that when I had my own family, I'd spend lots of time with my kids. I wanted to have meals together every day and go out on weekends. I couldn't wait to start my own family. I finally did at 26. My husband Benjamin was a busy sales executive, but we had a child soon after getting married, and we became a family of 3 within a year. I loved my job as an editor, but what I wanted most was to spend joyful times with my family. But those joyful times hardly ever came. Samuel was frail from birth and had multiple chronic conditions. By the time he was 8, his health had deteriorated significantly, and he was frequently in and out of the hospital. He fought his illnesses bravely. Thanks to a supportive work environment, I managed to balance my job with spending time with Samuel. I thought about quitting many times, but the high medical bills made it difficult. Our life revolved around supporting Samuel's fight against his illnesses. Samuel's medical condition causes various things to happen, even on holidays or at night. Benjamin grew increasingly stressed and less discreet about showing it. Eventually, he stopped coming home and rarely visited Samuel in the hospital. We initially tried to talk and even argued about our family, but Benjamin didn't change. So I spent even more time in the hospital room, not wanting Samuel to feel lonely. I just wanted us to be a good family, even if it was just Samuel and me. My wish was in vain. Samuel never made it to his 13th birthday. He passed away a week before it. He had said he wanted to eat a chocolate-loaded birthday cake with both Mom and Dad. But neither the cake I'd ordered nor Benjamin ever made it to his hospital room. I was the only one there for Samuel's last moments, and I alone prepared for his funeral. Benjamin claimed he was busy with work and barely showed up for the funeral. Seeing Benjamin uncomfortable at the service, I felt nothing anymore. Once again, I gave up on the idea of family. Shortly after, I became the editor-in-chief. I had always prioritized Samuel, but considering my career, the previous editor-in-chief nominated me. To be honest, I never had any interest in climbing the career ladder. Family was my top priority. But now, my beloved Samuel was gone, and my husband hardly ever came home. I had no family left to prioritize, I threw myself into my work to escape the sorrow and loneliness of losing Samuel. I visited Samuel's grave often, but when Benjamin found out, he just sighed heavily. Still, I continued to place flowers on Samuel's grave. Sometimes I'd find fresh flowers there, and I thought maybe Benjamin had been visiting secretly, but I never asked him directly. 3 years passed in a blur of work. I had gotten used to the overwhelming busyness, but when I thought about life outside of work, I felt an irrevocable loneliness. Then one day, something unbelievable arrived at my home. A high school admission guide addressed to Samuel, who had passed away 3 years ago. I knew this couldn't be possible, but if Samuel were alive, he'd be 15 now, the age to enter high school. I couldn't help but feel as if Samuel were still alive, even though I knew he wasn't. I immediately called the school. A clerk answered. "Excuse me, I received a high school admission guide addressed to Samuel, but..." "Congratulations on this occasion." "No, Samuel passed away 3 years ago." "What? Oh, please hold on a moment." The line switched to hold music after I heard a voice that sounded like someone recalling something. After a while, a different woman, who said she was a teacher at the school, came on the line. I explained the situation again, suggesting it might be a mistake. She then asked me to come in for a pre-admission meeting. Strangely, she also confirmed my name, which I hadn't mentioned. Wait, did I say my name? Then she said something unbelievable. "Your son is waiting for you." At first, I was suspicious and didn't understand, but she kept insisting over the phone. I started to feel as if Samuel were really alive. I knew Benjamin would think I'd lost my mind if I told him, but I agreed to go to the school. I knew it was impossible, but I couldn't help wanting to see even a shadow of Samuel, who was gone. On the day of the pre-admission meeting, I walked through the high school gates. "Are you Miss Emily?" The woman who greeted me had the kind voice I'd heard on the phone. "Thank you for coming today. Please, this way." She led me to the parent-teacher conference room. In the room sat a young boy, probably in middle school. His profile before he turned to face me eerily resembled Samuel, and it took me aback. "Nice to meet you. My name is Mason. Sorry for the surprise." "So, we are meeting for the first time, aren't we? You do look a bit like Samuel, but you're not him." "I apologize for the deception. I'm not your son, but I am Benjamin's son." His shocking words left me speechless. He then explained that he was the child of Benjamin and his mistress. I had suspected that Benjamin was having an affair. He was never home, and our relationship was strained. But to find out he had a child from a common law marriage was beyond shocking. Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. Of course, I felt sadness for myself, but I also felt sorry for Mason's situation. Actually, I knew about his circumstances. We have an academic test for class placement for new students. That's when he told me about his situation, and that he knew about you. He asked me to invite you here. The teacher deeply apologized, but I had no intention of blaming her. Thank you for caring for him. I already felt like he was a son to me. Afterward, Mason and I moved to a nearby park to talk more. He detailed his life circumstances. His mom, Ava, was a colleague of Benjamin's. They were in a common law marriage and hadn't officially tied the knot. He was an unplanned child, and both parents considered him a burden. He found out about me by secretly checking Benjamin's phone. "I wanted to know what kind of person you were, so I followed you and saw you at the grave. I learned I had a brother." I asked, suspecting the answer, and it turned out that the unfamiliar bouquets occasionally placed at Samuel's grave were from him. The shock that it wasn't Benjamin was overtaken by my gratitude and affection for Mason. "Thank you so much." I didn't know anything about him, so all I could think to do was leave flowers. "Your brother was a very kind boy, just like you." "I wish I had a brother. It would have been fun." Mason then shared his current family situation. His mom, Ava, was education-focused and had strictly made him study, but he hadn't achieved any special grades. Since then, he felt mostly neglected. Neither his dad nor mom ever attended school events, and there was hardly any conversation at home. Even meals were not prepared for him. It was clear he was starved for parental love. Yet Mason seemed to me like a straight arrow, kind young man despite it all. "I can't ask you to be my mom, but I'd like you to attend the orientation for incoming students in place of my mom. I'll, of course, thank you for it. And if you want to get back at Dad and Mom, I'll help." I decided to take revenge, not just for my own bitterness, but also for the hardships Mason had endured. Mason already had several pieces of incriminating evidence, and we decided to confront them with it. I waited at the house where Mason lived, timed to their return from a trip. Both Benjamin and Ava were visibly shocked when they saw me. I slammed down the evidence Mason had given me and calmly demanded a divorce and compensation. In a panic, Benjamin pleaded, "I have no intention of marrying her. I don't need an underachiever like him either, so drop the divorce and the compensation claim." My anger exploded when Mason was called an underachiever, and before I knew it, I was pounding the table. "I don't need a person who neglects their own child." Shortly after, a representative from Child Protective Services, whom Mason and I pre-arranged, arrived. Mason explained his situation. Benjamin and Ava were thoroughly blamed, but had nothing to say in their defense. Later, I received the compensation I had demanded from Benjamin. Not only did Mason declare he never wanted to see Benjamin again, but Benjamin's parents also disowned him when they learned of the situation. Rumors about what Benjamin had done to Mason eventually spread to his workplace. And with the compensation he had to pay me, he seemed to be struggling financially. Mason chose to be taken into care by Child Protective Services, saying they were better than Ava. Benjamin's parents, who were genuinely kind and decent people, offered to become Mason's guardians, and I gladly agreed. Of course, I attended Mason's orientation for incoming students as promised. Seeing Mason with his new backpack, smiling, filled me with warmth, as if I were watching my own son. At orientation for incoming students, the teacher who let me meet Mason approached me. The teacher was happy to have me there. I imagined that this is how it would have been if Samuel were alive. Not just Samuel, but both Samuel and Mason, smiling together. If it weren't for Mason, I might still be drowning in loneliness and work. "Mason, congratulations!" "Thank you so much for coming." "Thank you for finding me." We celebrated the day as if we were a real family. "I have a gift for your enrollment." I told him I planned to use the compensation from Benjamin for his college expenses and encouraged him to enjoy high school life. I wanted Mason to find what he loves and pursue it wholeheartedly, making up for what Samuel couldn't do. Hearing this, Mason cried tears of joy. Despite everything, I've continued to interact with Mason after the orientation. I think of him as another Samuel, growing up and becoming more mature. Mason seems to consider me as his new family, and we often go out to eat together, sharing stories and concerns about his recent school life. Mason wants to become a teacher. The teacher who helped us meet is still actively helping students with their problems. He wants to be a teacher who can genuinely assist students in what they need, he said. I've decided to help Mason achieve his dream in any way I can. I may not be his mom, but I want to help Mason live a happy life, making up for what Samuel couldn't have. We're often mistaken for a real family, and I find that delightful. I now know that family doesn't have to be bound by blood.